Welcome to the I Get Better podcast with your hosts, Charlene Renee and Phaedra Smith, where we discuss topics related to life, love, mental, physical, and spiritual health, and how we can all get better together.
Hello and welcome back. To those that are new to the podcast, we welcome you. Thanks for joining us on today's show. I am Phaedra Smith.
And I'm Charlene Renee.
And today's topic of the day is I get better when I use wisdom.
Ooh.
So we're going to jump into the definition. What's the definition that you have for wisdom, Charlene?
Okay, according to our Webster/Merriam dictionary, it is the soundness of an action or decision with regard to the application of experience, knowledge, and good judgment, or the ability to think and act using knowledge, experience, understanding, common sense, and insight. Furthermore, it is also the ability to discern inner qualities and relationships.
Wow, I like that third one.
Yeah, so wisdom is very important.
I completely agree. I have a quote that I was reading a book the other day, and it's a quote by Jeffrey. I can't say this man's last name. Starts with a C. Anyways.
Give that man his credit. Put some respect on his name.
And Jeffrey starts with a G. The greatest scholars are not usually the wisest people. And I thought, man, I got to write that down.
Because
it's so true.
Yeah, we're going to get into why that is true. But I would like to follow it up with a quote as well.
All right.
From the good book. The good book. And it brings me to mind of this scripture, and I've heard it quite a time or two. And it's Proverbs 4:7. And it says, wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. So when I hear that, I think principal thing means first. So get that first. That's priority. And that's why it's important for us to get better at getting wisdom and utilizing wisdom in our decision making. So there's our quotes. Let's go ahead and jump right in and talk about some of the barriers to getting wisdom.
One of the barriers I came up with was emotion. Sometimes, I know in my experience, emotion has gotten in front of me being wise, me making wise decisions, me reacting in the wisest of ways. I allowed emotion to control that and dictate that. So I think that is a barrier.
Yep. Do not lead your decisions with emotions. It will get you in a world of trouble. Oftentimes. Right. And another barrier to getting wisdom is confusion. When you are confused about something, you're going to have a very difficult time making wise choices and wise decisions. And that's why that second part of getting wisdom in that scripture that says, with all thy getting, get understanding, it's an important part of gaining wisdom. Because when you are confused, usually it's because you don't understand something. And it's going to be difficult to make decisions based on lack of knowledge and lack of understanding.
Yeah, I heard a quote. It says we are destroyed by our lack of knowledge. But man, you can have a lot of knowledge, but if you don't have that understanding, that reason why, it really does kind of just leave you still hanging out in the air. I like that.
Yeah. And so let's talk about a few examples of situations where wisdom just kind of comes in handy and it was helpful to you or I and in our lives. So I'll let you give an example, but I really think of this episode of the show that I love, which everybody who knows me knows. I love the Golden Girls. And on that show, of course, you got Dorothy, who's seen as the wise person in the house, and you got Rose. And it was an episode where, just to really briefly give you the synopsis of what happened. So Rose had somebody threatening her or something like that. They were sending her all kinds of threats and things in the mail. So she got a letter in the mail. and she was afraid to open it. And she was like, what if there's a deadly spider in there, and when I open it, it jumps out, it's gonna bite me? So Dorothy just throws the envelope on the floor and starts jumping up and down on it and stomping on the envelope. And so Rose looks at her and she's like, you're wise. You're just wise. And I just cracked up because she didn't even think. Like, of course, we know Rose is kind of ditzy, but she didn't even take the knowledge and understanding and apply it to the situation to where it's like, okay, if there is a spider in there, you can just kill it before you open it. So
yeah.
It wasn't that she didn't know it, but it was like she wasn't tapping into that wisdom. And she recognized it. And she was like, you're just wise. You're just So anyway, so what's your example of it?
So mine isn't as funny, but so my example of having to use wisdom has been and still is ongoing in my personal financial development. So I remember going through Financial Peace University. I went through it with my husband the first time, and then I actually helped my cousin teach the class for our church a second time. And my struggle is still not purchasing things based off of my feeling. But when I look back, my struggle has always been in the past, not saying things based on feeling. So I am still working through that, and I'm walking through that even in my financial life, being able to use wisdom in my purchases. And a part of me using wisdom has meant that I have to set up goals, long-term goals that I'm trying to aspire to in order to, in my short term, in my decision making on my daily basis, being able to look forward at my long-term goals so that I can make wise decisions based on what I want for the future.
Right. So then you would say that being wise in your finances is something you can use every single day. And
every day.
And it's also not enough to just have the knowledge and the information.
No.
But you have to be able to utilize it in the moment.
Yeah.
And taking that application of the knowledge is key, because we can know information all day. That's why they said the scholars aren't the most wise. They have plenty of information, but sometimes it requires something beyond just the information.
Absolutely.
And we're definitely going to get into that. So let's get into some practical ways to get better at getting wisdom. Let's talk about that.
So one of the things that I wrote down for myself was to surround myself around wise counsel. So I remember before my grandfather passed away, he was one of the people that I always called. And, it wasn't any shame in it. I definitely milked him for his wisdom, because he was a studier of the word, and he read his Bible, he prayed, he meditated. And so he was kind of like Dorothy in that he just saw things very practically. And I think being able to sit back and to say, just stump on the envelope, that is very important, to be able to just say, just do this. Because sometimes we get so caught up in trying to go too deep that we forget to just do the practical things that wisdom is very practical. It's
that common sense, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the time it's not a whole bunch of book reading and lecture listening to. It's just simply utilizing experience and common sense. Yeah. And so many people lack that, unfortunately. And not to be condescending, but I've come across quite a few people who just lack that common sense, and they're very intelligent. Their IQs are very high, but wisdom will get you into places that your intelligence, your IQ will not.
Yeah, that was some hot stuff right there.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a word.
That's a word.
So definitely surrounding yourself with wise people. You're typically going to be the wise person to someone. They're going to be able to come to you. But even the most wise people have another person that they can consult with, who can counsel them. And a lot of the times, you might want to look to your elders, your grandparents, those people who have been there, done that, who can tell you things that a school book isn't necessarily going to teach you.
Right. I think having multiple resources is really important because there's things that you don't want to talk to your grandparents about. There's things you might not want to share with your closest friend or your pastor. And so you might need a therapist. I think having multiple channels is very important because it just really kind of opens you up for being able to get real with yourself, but also to be able to see things from a different perspective. Having those multiple channels is super important. So the other thing that I would say is taking a moment to pause versus just reacting is very wise. I think it gives your brain enough time to say, slow down and be able to use that higher functioning part of your brain that says, girl, stop.
Yeah, like you said, not acting out of emotion. Like that. I heard that called like your lizard brain, like it's instinctual and you just move.
I like that.
Stopping to think. I read it in a book. I didn't make it up. A book.
No.
Yeah. So but that lizard brain is just instinctual. It doesn't stop to think. It just reacts. And sometimes we, through habit or from trauma or whatever, will react to things, and wisdom doesn't even have time to show up.
Yeah.
The scene. They come to the scene after the fact when it's all said and done, and
the damage has been done.
You've done what you shouldn't have done because you were reacting out of emotion and not taking that second to stop and pause, or minute, or days for that matter, to pause.
So you mentioned being able to have discipline as being super important also. Would you like to expound on that?
So another practical way to work on getting better at wisdom is to really tap into that insight piece and that ability to apply what you know. And a lot of that is found through discipline. So when we talk about the fact that people sometimes know how to do the right thing, for example, when you said about money and not spending or overspending or buying out of emotion, it requires a level of discipline to be able to tap into wisdom and to get to where you want to be. And if you're not exercising it and practicing it, you will find yourself not getting better and not making wiser choices and wiser decisions because you don't have that discipline in place.
Right.
So practically, the way to get better at something is to practice. So sometimes you just have to practice exercising discipline as it relates to your decision making.
Right, I agree with that.
And then you have one more practical way for us to get better at wisdom.
I think I kind of talked about it, using knowledge versus emotion. And we talked about also that element of pride not becoming an obstacle for people.
Okay, so remaining teachable. You want to remain teachable. You want to put yourself in a one down position sometimes. Yeah. And so one down means you put your pride to the side and let someone else be the teacher for the moment.
Yeah, you would be surprised. I mean, I know for me, I have really had to check myself and be like, no, this is a moment where you need to remain open to being teachable, because you really will block yourself from getting information that can be completely life-changing if you don't remain open and you don't remain teachable and you don't squash the pride. So I think that's a huge one.
For sure. So those are some practical ways to get better at wisdom. Just a few examples where wisdom is important, but gaining wisdom, keep that as a priority in life. One other thing I want to say before we wrap up, when you talk about wisdom, sometimes it refers to a part of yourself that you're tapping into that you can't necessarily explain. And wisdom looks like a higher level of intellect at times and brings you into that insight. So insight is not something that's easily explained or seen. And sometimes you just have this feeling in you, in your gut, in your mind, in your head, and you'll know something, or some voice will tell you something about a situation. And we may ignore it because we're thinking logically. And logic is not always your friend. You want to use knowledge and application, but logic, I think, is even inferior to wisdom. So getting better at wisdom will bring you to a whole nother level of success, because wisdom will tell you things that a school book or a professor or a teacher can't always tell you. So getting better at that, it just opens you up to a whole nother level of life. In my experience, in really recognizing when something is wisdom too, and not just my own knowledge and ability, but like, wow, that was really above and beyond. I don't know where I got this from, but it was great and it was helpful.
Right. Well, I think that's why it's so important to take that pause. Taking that pause really does allow you to self-reflect, but also just listen to that soft voice that's leading you or pointing you into a direction.
And sometimes the voice does come through counsel and another person.
Yeah. So, I 100% agree. But most likely that voice that counsel that you've gotten, most likely you already heard it from somewhere else. If you were to like take a moment to pause and self-reflect, I'm a firm believer, and I tell my clients that you already have the knowledge that you need, but sometimes we have to take a moment to get quiet, to really hear what you need from yourself and allow yourself to take that pause.
And exercise discipline in applying that knowledge.
Yes, ma'am. I feel like we can go on and on about this.
Right. Well, we're going to wrap it up. We're going to not keep rambling on because there is so much to say about it. Yeah. But we did want to at least touch on that topic for today. And of course, remind you to keep tuning in, to rate, review, and subscribe to the I Get Better podcast. Make sure you reach out to us with your questions and comments. You can inbox us through direct messaging, through email, and let us know what you think. And let us know what you want to hear on the show. So keep tuning in, and until next time, keep getting better.